Hello. Hi. Hello. I'm back. I'm doing it again. Thanks for the wonderful warm response to my first video, and thank you to both the Blue Bookmark Club and to Book Talk, etc. Patreon, Facebook group for sharing this video. That's incredibly nice. Thank you, Renee. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Susie. Thank you, Megan. I really appreciate it. And everybody's like really nice comments about my video. My name is Genevieve. I am a nerd who loves to read a lot, and I am going to rank all of the 5-star reads that I read in 2021 because people were asking me after my book of the month ranking. They were like, well, what was your favorite book of 2021? And spoiler, not a lot of the main picks from book of the month were on the top tier list. And that's not because they were bad. It's just because that's just how the cookie crumbles, I guess. So first, I'm going to, before we even get into this, I'm going to start off with a couple things to give some context to what we're about to discuss today. First of all, I'm going to be using the tier making template that some people might have seen online. It's basically a ranking system that has little pictures and you can just kind of pop them in. You'll see what I'm talking about when I go over to that screen. But the reason I'm using that is because I don't want to do a formal ranking of like number 1 all the way down to 55. I rated 55 books of the 172, I think it was 172, that I read. I ranked 55 of those as 5-star reads. And I'm not going to rank every single, like over 170 books that I read. I'm not going to do that. I don't want to. 55 is perfectly fine. But just because they were 5-star reads, I think I need to kind of explain what I mean by that, right? Like, because I think that the ranking of things on Goodreads is so personal. Everybody has their way of doing it. And so I'm going to explain how I do it. And you don't have to agree with me if you don't want to. That's what's beautiful about this world, right? But if you do, that's awesome too, right? So, or maybe we meet somewhere in the middle. So I rank my books as follows. I personally hate the star thing. I don't like using numbers because it doesn't, a 5-star read to me means so many different things. It really depends on the book, right? I could have a 5-star experience with a book that is not really a great book, but I had a great time with it, if that makes sense. I enjoyed the crap out of it. So for me, it's more highly recommend to kind of a, what's the word, like specific recommend, or would recommend for certain readers. I finished it and it was fine. I'm not mad I finished it. And then I have a shelf actually on my Goodreads that's literally just book and resentment form, because it kind of goes from that to that. It's like, fine, I finished it, whatever, to I cannot believe I finished this book and I'm mad about it. I would have rather DNF'd it. So that's kind of my vibe. And I love talking about books, obviously. I love recommending things to people. I love hearing people's recommendations. That's why I listen to book podcasts. And I don't expect everybody to have that same experience. I kind of look for clue terms. If somebody struggled with a particular aspect of a book, that might be something that I really love, and vice versa, right? And I don't know. I think that's like the mystery, the fun, right? Like that's the best part about being a reader. Now, another thing I want to qualify. So I did read over 170 books in 2021. And I want to talk about how I did that, because I find lately there's been this discussion about feeling less than for not reading enough, or why is it a competition? It's not a competition. I think I touched on this on my last video too. This is not a competition. I personally have this desire to finish as many books as possible because there's so many books I want to read. I have a hunger inside of me that is not fulfilled by other media. Books fulfill that hunger. I will drop off of video games like that. I will stop watching a movie or give up on a TV show, just kind of wander away from it. I just don't care. But with books, I have books that I am so desperate to read. And if anything, I find that I get overwhelmed with wanting to read all of them at the same time and being extremely unrealistic about my ability to do that, which is why I also listen to audiobooks and read with my eyeballs, right? I use that term interchangeably, frankly. I don't see the difference between an audiobook and an ebook and a physical book. Maybe, obviously, like there's time commitments that are a little bit different, but I've been listening to audiobooks since I was little. My mother got books on tape from the library, and then I just kind of fell into that same pattern. So since childhood, like that has been a very normal way for me to consume a book. And if anything now, it's just easier and you can speed them up. It's great. All right. I listen to audiobooks. I do speed them up. I find that on one speed, it is so slow. I feel like I'm waiting to hear the story. It really just boils my blood to listen to an audiobook on 1 time speed, the normal speed. That was something I graduated to. Now I listen to usually at about 2 times or over that. Not everybody needs to do that. Like, it's something I built up to. I started by going to 1.25 to 1.5 to up and up and up. It was just sort of a natural progression. I like it because I do kind of get lost in the book. I get lost in the narrative. I've heard people talk about zoning out, whatever. I think that since I've been listening to them for so long, I just naturally fall into the story and am lost in that. And when I read, whether it's with my eyes or otherwise, I see things inside of my head that are so vivid and I get lost inside of that world, right? And that's what I want in a book. So if a book can do that for me and I want to be there and I'm engrossed in it, it's basically a 5-star read for me. And it's extremely successful. So I hope that makes sense. I hope that kind of qualifies like how I read and maybe you understand a little bit more about how I consume books and why I read so much. If you read 5 books a year, that's more than a lot of people. My sweetie does not read that much. My sweetie barely finishes maybe a book every 2 years. So this is not a race. This is not a competition. I am not looking at anybody's Goodreads thinking, I read more than her, or I read more than him, or I should, oh my gosh, like my card as like a ultra reader is going to be taken away if I don't read like more than 200 books. And I feel that if that is something, there's like a guilt in you that is created, that's something that you need to work on. Like, don't take that out on people that want to read a lot. Or just, realize that it's not a competition. It doesn't matter. Don't feel less than. Don't use that as an excuse to feel less than, because you shouldn't. Books are awesome. Let's read. That's it. Let's do it. Okay. So I think I'm supposed to say you have to like and subscribe to this. So please do that if you want me to keep doing this or whatever. And we'll get started with the ranking. Okay. Here we go. We're doing it. So as I said, this is like a system that we use to make this little picture. So I'll explain the rankings here as I explained how I rate things. So S tier is basically best of the best. It's like A++. Think of it like that, or 5 stars. So this is the 5-star of the 5 stars. 10 stars. A is really, really great, but obviously not an S tier, right? For me, B is like perfectly serviceable, totally fine, great. C is C and D. I don't even know if I'm going to use D. I'll be totally honest, because like, what's the point of D? Like, it's almost a 4-star. Like, what does that even mean? So yeah, this is going to be interesting. We're going to see, and I'll explain like why I put things where I put them. We'll kind of get into that. So first of all, I'm just going to pick books at random because again, I loved all of these. So there's no, like, just because it's on a lower tier doesn't mean it's not a good book. And also I'm doing this all from memory, right? So it just means that my memory of it is probably not as strong or is the strongest, right? I'm still living inside of that space. I probably bought multiple copies of it, etc., etc. So Braiding Sweetgrass is the first one I want to talk about. This is by Robin Wall Kimmerer. This is nonfiction. This is going right up in that S tier because this is essentially a series of essays about being a Native woman and her connection to her culture, as well as being a botanist and a scientist, and when those things work together, when they don't work together, and how essentially she's lived her life in between these two things. I loved this book so incredibly. I cried it many times because she talks a lot about the frustration of what it means to try to do right by the environment, and how hard that can be sometimes, and dealing with the anxiety and dealing with the fear of the future for what is supposed to happen. So I really can't recommend this book enough. This is a book I honestly feel more people should read. And it's not something I feel like you have to read cover to cover. I think you could kind of hop through and experience a few different stories and then kind of come back to it if you wanted to. I did listen to it all. I listened to this and then I bought it physically so I could go back and revisit it. And she narrates it, and she's a great narrator too. She talks about being a wife and a mother, and just these amazing stories. There's a story where she is trying to help these small amphibians cross this really highly, populated highway, and just trying to find happiness, or at least find some sort of hope in the few that were that made it, and trying not to hold on to the ones that didn't and that got squished by traffic. Just thinking about this book really kind of gets to me. And she is also a poet. So one thing you'll realize is that I love books written by poets. So I can't continue to belabor this book. I really can't. That's the problem with ranking all of my 5-star reads, is that I just want to talk about all of these all day. So but Braiding Sweetgrass, I just think needs a lot of attention, and I cannot wait to reread parts of this book. I absolutely cannot wait. So that's that. All right, let's go into How Lucky. I'm going to put that one as a B because I really enjoyed this book a lot, but it is kind of like a little snack in between other books. It's about, and I talked a little bit about this in the main Book of the Month pick. It's about a man who has a severe physical disability that he's living with that I don't recall the name of off the top of my head because I'm, again, not using notes, and I probably should, and I'm sorry. But what I loved about this is how the story was told was extremely interesting to me, and I think it gives a lot of dignity to people that are constantly overlooked. So I really enjoyed this book, and I do wonder how other people feel about it in the disability community, because it's written by a man who is not, which I don't think is a problem. I'm just curious what other people's POV is on that. Bad Muslim Discount. That one's going up to A tier for me. It's not like the ultimate, but it is so good. This book surprised me. I listened to an interview on Sarah's Bookshelves Live with the author and just was so charmed by him. And his writing style is extremely interesting. He's an attorney, and I know that Sarah from Sarah's Bookshelves Live talks about really enjoying books written by attorneys, and I think I'm the same way. I think that's pretty easy considering that they have to write a lot of stuff. I don't know, and they're kind of looking for a creative outlet. So if you're a good writer anyway, and you want to find a fun creative outlet, I feel like a novelist is a great path for attorneys. What I loved about this book, I really enjoyed the 2 POVs, which doesn't always work. And I thought that it was going to go one way, and then it really doesn't. The paths of the 2 POVs kind of cross and then go off in different directions. There's action in it. There is a lot of suspense in it. There's a lot. I did learn a lot, but I do want to preface that by reading diversely, which I do like to do, it doesn't mean that I now know everything about it's not like a monolithic experience, right? This is the experience of 2 very different people and their very different backgrounds, which I really appreciated, and I think is what really works the best for this book, because often when I read diversely, which again, I'm not criticizing, everybody should do that. Sometimes I feel like people read one book by one person and are just like, well, this is how it is for all that, and it's like, well, yeah, I can't wait to read more from this author. I think he's written some YA novels that I really do want to check out this year. All right, so that's that one. Now Miguel, Leanne, Moriarty. Okay, I am going to put this one. Ooh. This is not my favorite Liane Moriarty. It's amazing, and I still gave it 5 stars, but it's not my favorite. I did love it. It is not my favorite of all her books. My favorite is Truly, Madly, Guiltily. I'm a huge Liane Moriarty fan. I've read literally everything she's ever written. I love her dynamic, her family dynamics that she has in all of her books. I think what I struggled with in this book, it's a little long. I think it's a little too long. It dwells on certain things a little too long. But ultimately, I think it's a really successful novel about a woman who goes missing, and it's about the backstory between each of her family members and sort of their recollections of how certain things went down in their family. I love that. I love that it's like there's 5 different characters, 3 children and 2 adults, and they all see different aspects of their lives together running a family business, which is a tennis coaching business, very differently. And like, I could spend so much time with those characters. The woman who goes missing, there's this great scene in the beginning where she's like talking to her dishes in the dishwasher and trying to make them all fit together. And I love that so much. I want to spend so much time with her characters. I know that, people have very intense feelings about her books, specifically 9 Perfect Strangers. They thought it was boring, whatever. I could hang out with her characters all day. There we go. So that's Apples Never Fall. I also do not understand why Liane Moriarty gets the shittiest book covers I've literally ever seen in my entire life. What is that about? So my dog is making noises, so there we go. All right, I'm gonna go to After Parties next. This book is gorgeous. Unfortunately, the author OD'd before this book came out. And as somebody who's definitely struggled with substance abuse, like, it really ripped my heart out when I heard that. Especially, I believe he died in December of 2020. So I was really drawn to this book after hearing about the author, and I really did enjoy this book. It's just extremely serious, and there's a lot. It's very lit-fic-y, so if you're a lit-fic person who doesn't enjoy sex in lit-fic, don't read this because you're not gonna like it. There's a lot of different. It's a collection of short stories. Some of them do go into sexual relationships between different characters. The thing about this book, and the reason that it's C-tier, is that I just don't remember all of it as much as there are certain things that just didn't stay with me as long as I would have liked. And that's not. It sounds like I'm saying that the author wasn't successful. I think the author was extremely successful making the thing that he wanted to make. And I think it's an achievement. Again, gave it 5 stars. But I think overall, whenever I think about this book, I don't necessarily think of each of the stories, right? It is a very millennial read. There's this conversation right now about who's the great millennial author, which I'll make a whole video about how I feel about that, but whatever. Even though the author, Anthony So, no longer here, this is all we have left, right? Like of what he has, that I'm aware of. I don't know if there's something that just wasn't published. That would be amazing if there was something that wasn't published that they were able to put together. But he definitely has this millennial vibe. And what I mean by that is there is this defeated sense of just trying to make the best of what is going on at the given moment. A frustration, a confusion that I think is profoundly concentrated in one's 20s. And also this like aching creative voice that feels, I don't know, very millennial to me. Maybe it's because I am a millennial, but I'm not entirely sure. I'm not a child of immigrants, but I'm the descendant of colonizers, but that's different. This author really goes into talking about the being a descendant of Cambodian refugees, and that very much plays a huge part within each of the different stories. Man, the last story in particular, that's the one that sticks with me the most. So That's After Parties. Okay, moving on. I think I'm going to put House and Cerulean Sea also into C category. Again, all of these are 5 stars, so everybody relax. I feel like that's a really popular book. The House and Cerulean Sea is really pretty. This is like if I liked a Neil Gaiman book. That's how I feel about The House and the Cerulean Sea. I am not a fan of Neil Gaiman's writing. I know, I might just make a video about my unpopular book opinions that are going to get me yelled off of the internet, but here we are. I love the magic in this. I would recommend this book. This is like a very specific niche reference. I would recommend this book to people who don't like magic books, but want to try something that's magic-y, because there is fantasy in this, but it's not so beat you over the head with it. The reason I'm putting this at C tier is because it is very fairy tale-like, which for me is not something I seek out. So this just happened to really work for me, but overall I'm not a huge fantasy, specifically fairy tale person. I actually like fantasy, but I don't love the fairy tale aspect of things. And this is a very fairy tale take on social issues that I think are very relevant to today. As well as, even to previous generations. So, and this book is very heartwarming. It's a great palate cleanser. I feel like palate cleansers in particular, are kind of B to C tier for me, where it's like, this is going to help you, B to C is all things that are going to get me through a book hangover. And then A and S are the stunners, the ones that are just that stick with me, that I get really hungover having read. So there's that. Anna K, that is S tier. So when I was reading Anna K, I was pacing around my office. I was supposed to be working, and I was listening to this book, and I'm just pacing around the office, not able to focus. I had my hands on my head. I was like, oh my God, how is this going to end? Because I've never read Anna Karenina, but I have a pretty good idea of what it's about. Well, now I have a very good idea of what it's about, considering I read an adaptation of it. This book is so well done, and it is such a bummer that I really didn't feel the same way about the sequel. I didn't think the sequel was particularly, it wasn't bad, but I don't want to say it wasn't necessary, because it did kind of help me grieve a little bit, but it wasn't a 5-star read for me, let's just say that. Anna K is an adaptation of Anna Karenina, as I've said, but told through teenagers that go to these elite private schools. Anna K herself is the daughter of a wealthy South Korean immigrant to the United States who is in business, ? I don't think I actually know what her dad does, but she is super elite, top of the food chain at her school, and has this relationship with Alexei, who is just kind of bowls her over. And I had to remind myself, and this is the only thing that's a little icky about this book for me, I am 36, okay? When I read this, I was 35, but it's all the same. These are teenagers, and there is sex in this book, right? And that's weird to me. That is a little weird to me, reading about that. It's why I don't watch Euphoria. It's that is not for me. I don't feel the desire to watch younger people connect. I mean, I get it, but I don't know. Does that make sense? Does that make other people feel weird? I'm I don't. At the same time, it wasn't belabored or anything like that. It wasn't to the point where I was Jesus, I don't want to read this. I love the social class aspect of this, and very much wealthy kids doing wild things. And I just think that this author is so good with the kind of developing her characters. Why am I tripping over this statement? Yeah, I loved her character development within these, and it kind of made me want to read Anna Karenina, the actual Anna Karenina, but not really. I think I'm okay with just having read her adaptation. I just thought she did an excellent job. You can tell she's a fan of the original book, which I think is cool. All right, Falling. This is gonna go in C tier. I love this book. So this book came out on July 6th of 2021, and I know that because I pre-ordered it, and I was flying for the first time after being vaccinated, fully vaccinated, and I flew So it came out on July 6th. I like checked to make sure it was on my Kindle before I got onto the plane, and I finished the whole thing before I got to my final destination. So it was over the course of 2 flights. Oh man, I really enjoyed this book. Okay, this is what I love about this book. Basically, it's about if a pilot is given his family's kidnapped and he's given this ultimatum of crashing the plane or his family dies. So that's basically the plot. If you like Grey's Anatomy, and specifically if you like the episodes where there's a disaster, you'll live for this. Like, it's that. Basically, it's episodes of 911, right? Like, where it's like the big tsunami episode where you get to see everybody's different POV as to how they're dealing with the aftermath of this catastrophe. And you get to watch people be heroic and awesome and amazing. That's this book. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. If that's not your thing, you're going to think it's corny. But I didn't. I was so here for it. And I read it while I was flying, which was really fun. Some people might not love that, but I liked it. So, and actually, I'm part of the Sarah Bookshelves Lives Patreon community, and we were all trying to find it in an airport, and nobody could find this book in an airport, which I think is kind of funny. All right, I'm going to just pick it random here. I'm going to do Outlawed next. This is definitely another C tier. This is a very short book. I think that's what's working against it, actually. Normally, I want books to be shorter. This, I wanted it to be longer. I love that there's a non-binary character in it, and I just wanted more. That's all. It's basically a Western. The character wants to become a work in obstetrics, essentially, but it's in this environment that's very much like, I would say, probably the 1870s, 1880s of American Western colonization. So yeah, I really like Westerns. I'm actually kind of a huge Western fan, so I just wanted more from this. I loved the end with the what's the word? Like the standoff between the characters and law enforcement. I just thought it was amazing. And yeah, I don't know, I just wanted more of it. I liked the band of people that were all kind of queer misfits. I'm really into that as a queer misfit. So yeah, loved it. All right, let's go down here. Let's do Rewrite Upon Sticks. This one I'm going to put under A tier. Again, excellent. Love this book. This book, actually, while I was getting my left arm sleeve done, my tattooer recommended this book to me. Quan Berry, also a poet. I'll leave it at that. Everybody knows I love a poet at this point. This is about a 1980s field hockey team that uses magic to win their to win their games, and it's about the season leading into I want to say it's like 85 or 86, sometime in the mid 80s, and it is fascinating how each character gets their time to shine in this book, and it culminates in this amazing ending where they have kind of grown up and they can reflect on what happened. And I don't want to say too much more about this. I think you just need to read it if you like a feminist book, if you like a book with a really cool queer character, yeah, and if you just love like the 80s nostalgia vibe in general, you'll live for this. I love listening to women speak the way that they speak, right? Whoever that is within whatever culture that is. This just felt extremely authentic to me. It felt like this is how, for good and for bad. Like there's definitely some problematic shit that goes down in this book, and some toxicity in it as well. And it's kind of warts and all, and I love that. And yet I still love every single one of these characters. I really do. I'm going to reread this one. I bought it after reading it. So yeah, it was definitely one of those. All right. The Echo Wife, I'm going to put as a B tier because this book really makes me think. This is actually written by a non-binary author, which is pretty cool because I don't read enough from trans and non-binary authors. I feel like there's more books that have trans and non-binary characters than there are authors that are widely publicized. But, you know, I hope that changes. The Echo Wife is dark. It's definitely for, okay, this is again a very specific recommendation. If you like a book that has unlikable characters, unlikable narrators, unlikable women in particular. The main character is a scientist who has created clones. She's working on cloning technology, and I don't want to go too into the plot, but her husband's a dick, basically. Clones, marital strife, very short. I read this like in 2 days. It's like extremely short, and it's dark. It's very dark, and it makes you think a lot about humanity. Like, what is humanity? It also is a parable about abuse. So think about that while you're reading it. I'd highly recommend, if you listen to this, to get a physical copy that you can read the acknowledgments in the back. I think the acknowledgments are extremely important to read in this book and have a lot of context for it. There we go. Final Girl Support Group. This is going to be an A tier, not an S tier. I know, shocking. I read all of Grady Hendrix' books in 2021. I think the only thing I didn't read is those like collection of short stories. That's about it. So, holy shit, this book. I am a big horror fan. So, and this is an homage to slasher films, and I love slasher films so much. I love The Final Girl. My favorite slasher film is actually Black Christmas, the OG original. Even before Jamie Lee showed up on the scene, Black Christmas was the shit, and loved it, and I could literally talk about that this whole time. This book is high action, so if you're not an action person, you're not going to like this. I personally don't think you have to know a lot about horror to enjoy this. I just think if you do, you're going to hear a lot of Easter eggs. It's funny. Grady Hendrix loves to write strong, complicated women, which I think more men should maybe learn how to do. And yeah, he just does a great job. I think this is totally on par with A Bad Muslim Discount, actually, in the strong and complicated female character category. So really fun. I feel so bad saying this, but it's true. I didn't enjoy the audio experience with this and preferred reading it in print. It's narrated by a original Final Girl, actually, from Friday the 13th. Yeah, it's Adrienne King. But I don't know. Anyway, I didn't think she did the most. There was just like parts of the performance that just didn't work for me, and rarely does that happen, and it happened in this case. Sorry, I'm so sorry, because it's really cool that they got her to do it. But that's kind of why it's an A tier for me right now, too. All right, Last Call. This one, I'm going to put this in no, I'm putting it in a B tier. I love this book. Last Call is it's a true crime book, so nonfiction, and it is specifically about a serial killer who targeted gay men in New York City during the late 70s, definitely the 80s and part of the early 90s. Unclear about the late 70s part, but I feel like that might be part of it. But really what this is the history about specifically gay men, like many of them on the down low, not all of them, in New York, in the kind of gay club scene, which is a culture that has kind of been forgotten. Like, we do this with minority groups all the time. You know, we don't preserve that history because we don't think it's important. And this attempts to preserve some of that history, which I think is really, really valuable. What I also really like about this book is that it does not put the killer on a pedestal or kind of glorify any of his actions. He's revealed to be the coward that he is, and I really appreciated that. It's really about the victim. So this is like perfect true crime to me. I listened to this on Script, and at the end of it, there's an interview between the narrator and the author, which I thought was really great and super worth listening to. Yeah, all around great book. Keeper of Nights S tier. Like, I talked about this already in my book of the month book. This book is action from the start all the way through. I absolutely love the two opposing cultures of this character being both British and Japanese, and really struggling between those two identities and not feeling like she belonged in either of them. Plus, like, just the kind of hero's journey that she goes through, and I don't know if I'm using that appropriately, but I think it's a hero's journey, is super dark and gory, and I lived for it. I'm going to reread this before I read the second book that comes out in October. So I can't continue to glow about this, but it's So good. Okay. Bewilderment is S tier. Richard Powers is kind of S tier for me, just in general. This book killed me. I'm not a parent, but I love reading about fatherhood because I don't really read too much about fatherhood. And actually, I'm going to get into that a little bit more with another book here. Spoiler alert, The Dead Zone. And this, to me, is a book that serves as a metaphor for not just like how to try to be, again, a good global citizen, but also how to explain difficult things to people that are just too good for this world, which this man's son is. And there's a lot going on in this book. There's more than I could even really get into in just a brief summary. But what works for me the most in this book is just how quiet it is. It is a quiet meditation on a lot of really big ideas. It's also very short. So if you're not super down for reading the overstory, which you should because it's really good, but if you're not, like, I can understand that. But this is like a good entry point to Richard Powers. If you don't like the way he writes in this, then you're not going to like Richard Powers. There's a lot about the environment. There's a lot about politics, about academic politics, about, again, fatherhood. It's a heartbreaking book. And, you can kind of tell that Richard Powers does not think that things are going to go very well for us in the future moving forward. So if you're like in an existential place where you cannot handle dark shit, don't approach this. Just here's something that you might want to approach, though, that's a little bit more fun, and I'm going to put it on the A tier, even though I think for a lot of people they're not going to agree with me. The Last Thing He Told Me is so freaking good. I think this is weirdly a palate cleanser that made it up to the A tier, but it's because of the characters. Like, I just enjoyed the characters in this book. I again talked about this in this was the main pick for Book of the Month. And yeah, it just really worked for me. I found that I really cared a lot about this woman and her relationship to her stepdaughter and them trying to figure out this mystery. It's a family mystery, right? Let's go on to Frankly in Love. That is definitely C tier for me. I really enjoyed this book. I understand why people love it so much. I gave it 5 stars. I feel like I'm gonna have to say this for everything that's like below the A tier. Because all of this is on a spectrum for me. Like, there's different reasons why things are 5 stars, right? 5 stars does not fit all books in the same way. Frankly in Love, it was a slow burn for me in the beginning. Towards the end, I really, really started to vibe with it. This book just has a lot of heart. Honestly, that's really what gets me in this one. Frank is a quirky kid who is falling in love for the first time and trying to navigate that while also dealing with some really heavy life stuff that gets thrown his way. And that's about all I'm going to say about the plot, because again, I don't want to spoil this one. I think David Yoon is just like an incredible author, and I think that between him and Nicola, like, they're just this powerhouse. And actually, let's go ahead and do Nicola's next. This is S tier for me, sorry. Yeah. This is S tier because of the last 60% of this. How dare a YA novel surprise me this much? A YA romance surprise me this much, rip my heart out, and make me just cry thinking about the nature of love, the bravery that is to love someone. Like, Nicola Yoon is like one of my favorite authors, I think. I'm starting to realize this, which is so silly to think about it like that, but I've read almost everything she's written. I have everything, and I need to read that this year. The Sun Is Also a Star really messed me up. It's a lot. She nails it for me. Whereas Frankly in Love was amazing, but just didn't get me over the finish line in the same way that Nicola did. We Are the Brennans, excellent palate cleanser, really gripping family drama. That surprised me because I thought it was going to be sort of whiny, and it wasn't. It was a little bit more, it didn't give excuses for the bad behavior of these characters. And the end was cool. I really enjoyed the end. It's about a woman who has made a mess of her life, and she goes home, and in doing so, kind of has to face a lot of the things that she left behind. And it's also about the family members that are kind of accepting her back into their life and how all that goes. It's great. It's just, again, if you like, a book I kept, or not a book, actually, a TV show. There was this TV show that had that lady from Orange is the New Black on it, and she was like a nurse or something, and I don't remember the name of this show. If you remember, put it in the comments. And basically she, it's about her like dealing with how difficult it is to be a nurse, and like, her family's very Irish. Kind of reminded me a little bit of that, like where it was actually pretty interesting. And there were, the challenges that they were taking on weren't just related to them being like Irish immigrants. But also there was a cool POV from, the patriarch in the family who, did immigrate from Ireland, which was interesting. Okay, Red, White, and Royal Blue. I mean, why do we need to read any other book? Like, Red, White, and Royal Blue is perfect to me. It's interesting because I read One Last Stop, and you notice it's not, I read it in 2021 and it's not on this list. Not because I didn't like it, but because what works for me in Red, White, and Royal Blue is that Alex is so funny, and he's just not me in so many ways. Like, he's such an extrovert and just says silly things, and it's just, it's like you kind of want to be like him. You want to be this sort of brash, rushing into things kind of person, and I'm just not. And so I like living through that perspective was really cool. The thing about One Last Stop is that it's told from the perspective of like the more introverted character, and that just didn't work for me. I was like, okay, but I still liked it. Gave it 4 stars. But this one, I just loved their dynamic and as a couple. And there's one scene in particular that just really like pushed me over. I was like, oh my God. I actually rewound it and listened to it twice because I listened to this. I listened to it twice. I was like, oh my God. I remember just sitting here in my office and just like, oh my goodness. Yeah, that book is great. And I'm not like a huge romance person, but apparently I am, because literally 3 out of the 6 I have up at the top. Wow, that's wild. All right. Let's see. Okay, let's do The Dead Zone. The Dead Zone for me is an S tier. This surprised me. I didn't realize how much. So I'm doing this thing right now where I'm reading through all of Stephen King's books with my family. And this is the one that surprised me the most, because Stephen King, you think horror. This is really not horror at all. It's sci-fi and not time travel, but more like psychic stuff. And again, the relationship between the main character and his father, fascinating, just so cool to read about. Like how much he loved his dad, how much his dad loved him and understood him and supported him, even going through some really wild stuff. And then the end is like this political thriller that I was like, what is this book? It's about a man who has brain damage that essentially gives him, or unlocks this ability for him to be, to see the future and to know things and to have this sort of psychic energy. And it's about him, what he decides to do with that ability. Does that make sense? Yeah, I think that makes sense. So fantastic, fascinating. I want to reread this one, actually. It's really short too. It's not super long. And he just sticks the landing in the end. And King references a few different places in this that I think are important to know. So he talks about Castle Rock. This is, I think, this is the first Castle Rock book, which is a fictional place in Maine that Stephen King references a lot throughout his books. And there is specifically a serial killer who is a part of this book that I don't think that spoils too much. There's a lot that goes on in this book. There's like crime thriller, political thriller, wild ass psychic shit. Like, it's nuts. And all in like a short book. So he winds up talking about that, and then there's also a Carrie reference in the very end, but it's not Carrie the book that he references, it's Carrie the movie, which was wild. I thought that was pretty sick, so really enjoyed that. Let's see. All right, let's talk about Dial A for Aunties. I'll be honest, this is S tier for me, and this is, I think, a really great example of how weird my taste is not weird. My taste is my taste. How I cannot be pigeonholed into one kind of reader. This book is pure nostalgia for me. I'm not a big nostalgia person in general. I really hate being pandered to, especially as a millennial. I feel like as a millennial, it's all about, and I'm sure that this happens in other generations as well, but this is what I'm going through right now in my mid 30s that is really annoying. So everything is all about like, oh, you remember like Nickelodeon, or you remember like the thing you liked as a kid? And I'm like, yeah, but I liked it as a kid. I am not a child anymore, so I don't want to live. There's like an infantilization, I think, that happens with like obsessing over things that I really enjoyed as a child that does not work for me. I realize it worked. Like, I know that I'm in the minority with this. A lot of my friends love things that they loved as children, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, love what you love, right? But for me, I find it slightly infantilizing, especially as a woman. It's a way of judging and making me feel less than about the things I liked, I think, by repackaging it and reselling it to me. However, Dial A for Aunties reminds me so much of the books I used to read as a kid. This is a book for adults, which I read a lot as a kid. I basically read my mother's like cozy mysteries and my mother's like Sue Grafton novels, all of that stuff. Those were her kind of palate cleanser. She reads all kinds of different books, but she loves herself a little mystery. And these are the books that I picked up from my mom. And my mom would read this book. And in fact, I actually recommended this to her. She's like, I loved it. And it brought me back to those books that I just adored as a kid, where it's like, what is going to happen next? This isn't so much of a mystery as more of a cozy caper, because you know how this person dies. Like, you know who the murderer is. It's about a woman who goes on a blind date and accidentally kills her date. And it's about her trying to cover it up, basically, but using her family for help. But we're on her side this whole time. Like, the guy was trying to attack her, so it's like a self-defense situation. And I love the way that it was explained and sort of, I don't want to say like justified, but maybe the way that it was kind of laid out as to why she doesn't go to the police for help and instead relies on her family. That whole explanation really worked for me. And it was just, I couldn't put it down. It was so fun. It was so, it was just great. It was so great. And I cannot wait to read the second one. I'm so glad this author is writing more. There's also like a kind of escapism with this big fancy wedding and that they're involved in, and also trying to cover up a murder. It's wild. So love this book. Totally reminded me of the books I loved as a kid, that I would sneak off from, my mom's library holds shelf, just loved it. Let's see. Let's do You've Arrived at Your Destination. This is C tier for me. This is a great palate cleanser. It's like one of those little mini books. It's like super short. It's about a man who is tasked with giving a sperm donation at a like futuristic type of, probably not that futuristic to be totally honest, lab. And the idea is that you're able to pick the future for your child, and would you do that, and why would you not, based on genetics, right? So it's gets into that kind of territory. The reason it's C tier is because it's a total palate cleanser. Like, you just read this in between something else. So and it's like free or whatever on Amazon. Sky Falling, that is this is A tier for me. I laughed so hard reading this book. I love this book. I talked about this in the main book of the month pick. So I'm actually kind of surprised at how many main book of the month picks are up here, because I said that there wouldn't be, and there's like 4. So there you go. But notice some of these are older, but yeah, from 2021 specifically, there's this one. The Last Thing He Told Me, Sky Falling, Instructions for Dancing, and Keeper of Night. Sky Falling to me is just, it has a lot of humor and heart. I kept reading parts of it and then sharing it with my sweetie. Like, I read this on a plane as well, actually. The flight back after reading Falling the way there, so gives you time frame. Loved it. Let's see. Interior Chinatown. This is a B tier for me. Because of the structure. I think the structure was fascinating, and the way that it was put together was really cool. At the same time, I felt that it worked against me at times and was a little confusing for me. This is like you need to reread it to kind of wrap my head around parts of it. It's written like a script. So, and I think that there is a reason for that. And the reason, is to make a commentary about how Asian men in particular, how they are not seen as the main character. And so it's this like meta commentary about Hollywood and sort of like what we praise in our kind of shining, glorious heroes, and how Asian characters in general are kind of sidelined and sort of put into these boxes. And we don't see Asian people as able to carry a project or whatever. But then it really is also about being a human being, right? And it really gets into the humanity of this character who starts off as generic Asian guy and ends the book, as a father and as finally the main character in his story, which was, I don't know, it was just really beautiful. So Willis is the main character, but you don't learn his name until like further on into the book. He starts off as generic Asian man. And he wants to be Kung Fu guy, which is the highest that he could possibly be in the status of Hollywood, etc. But here's the thing with this book. There were other side characters and stories that I kind of got lost in because he's kind of maintaining that character structure of giving them generic names. And because of that, it was like, wait, who are we talking about? And then it evolves and you're like, wait, what? Like, so there were times when I got kind of confused, which is why I would need to reread it. And again, the structure kind of worked for me and worked against me at times, which is why it's amazing and important. And I think more people should read it. It's super short, won the National Book Award, but there's like a little bit of challenge to that. You just have to be aware of. You can't just burn through it really quickly. People We Keep is, I want to put that as A tier, but actually I'm going to put it as B tier. I loved this book. I love the 90s aspect of it. So I was a kid in the 90s, so reading about an adult in the 90s is always kind of fun to see, the thing. I recognize that thing, but I was like little and didn't really understand it, That was pretty cool. Overall, I would highly recommend this book to people that love a more quiet, character-driven story, that there is an evolution, but it's a quiet one, and it's not like this is an episode of This Is Us, literally, like this, or a season of This Is Us in book form. So if that's your thing, if that's your vibe, like go ahead and pick that one up. And I used to hate like when we would compare books to like TV shows and movies, but it kind of works, especially because not everybody's read every book. So, but a lot of people might have seen a TV show over, or a movie or something. Very This Is Us vibes. And so it's a B because I had to be in the right mood for this. So yeah, and definitely like a more niche recommendation, I think. The Firekeeper's Daughter is S fucking tier and sick as shit, and I love this book and I want to read more. I'm highly nervous about her second book because this was a add-on for Book of the Month. I knew I wanted to read it just based off of what it was about, but it's a YA mystery about a woman who is and I say woman because she turns 18, so a young woman. Oh man, I don't want to like give too much away about this plot. It surprised me. Okay, we start off with this character. She is half Ojibwe and then half white, and that very much plays into the story. But she is not an official member of her tribe, although she does want to be connected to this thing. So very much about identity, etc. Then something horrific happens that I will not say. It's probably like pretty early on in the book, before 20%. And it changes the whole trajectory of her life. And it's about finding out why this happened. Even though we know the players in the crime, it's about finding there's more going on. And so she gets kind of engrossed into the politics of her community, and she winds up befriending somebody that, and kind of working with them. There's a lot going on in this book. I really don't want to spoil it because I was like, like literally throughout this whole thing. S tier, S tier, S tier. I'm also a big mystery person. I think that's not super obvious. I feel like I'm more of a mystery fan than I am letting on by what is in my S tier, but whatever. Anyway, absolutely amazing. Great Circle, that's A tier, absolutely. Maggie Shipstead, go get it. I love a big epic overarching book that talks a lot about a million different things. I like following one character throughout their entire lives. That's what I got to do in this book. People did not like the I heard this a lot when this book came out, and after it got shortlisted for the Man Booker, people did not enjoy the second timeline in this. There's two timelines. One follows a woman who is attempting to circumnavigate the world pole to pole in an airplane. And then the other is an actress who plays this woman in a film adaptation of her life. I loved the actress's timeline so much. There is an incredible scene where this actress, so she is sort of like a Kristen Stewart knockoff, essentially, and she has a scandal happen, and she has to go and make nice with the author of the books that have been adapted into a TV show that she is in, or movies that she's in. She has to make nice with this lady because very Kristen Stewart, she has like an affair, and she was dating her co-star and then is starting to date somebody else. It's very that. That lunch killed me. I laughed so hard. I loved her POV, the way she talks about the fans of the books, and I'm not talking about just regular book fans. I'm talking about like the ardent, keyboard warriors that feel like, they need to scream at people on the internet because that's what they choose to do with their time kind of fans, right? Like the ardent, rude people, basically. The way she talks about them, the way she, just her whole perspective, she's extremely unlikable. And I think that's why people don't like her. I loved her. I thought she was really funny in a super sad kind of way. And just her kind of being really desensitized to Hollywood culture, I thought was kind of cool. And I found that there was a parallel between the pilot, who very much stuck out within her own culture, right? She is, like I said, this book literally goes from this character's birth to her death. And within that, she has to kind of push against the expectations of being a woman who wants to be a pilot at a time when that was not possible. And she's very unlikable in her own way, right? Yeah, so I don't know. I like unlikable women. I like to read about them. I don't need to like the decisions they make. I don't need to co-sign their behavior, but I can enjoy it. Like, I can sit back and be like, oof, I can't believe she did that, I love doing that. So, and I felt like both of those characters had aspects of that within their, backgrounds, etc. So it was really cool. I love this book. It's long, it's real long, but I think worth your time. Okay. Nearly Normal Family. That's going to be a nice little palate cleanser in B. I love me some Scandinavian novels in general. This one just kind of fit the bill. It's really it's a family drama. A crime happens, and how does it affect each of the members of the family? And there's some twists and turns in there, and there's legal drama. That's really basically what this book is. If you like any of those things, you will probably like this. It's and I gave it 5 stars because I got really wrapped up in the character studies. Your mileage may vary. So, okay, The Buried. This one I'm going to put in a C tier. I had this on my shelf for forever, and finally was like, okay, I'm going to read this book. And so in January of last year, every day I would read so many pages, and there's only so many books I can do that with. This was great to do that with because it is kind of dense, but it's really cool. If you like travel fiction, if you like hearing about somebody kind of navigate a world that they're super unfamiliar with and learning a language, amazing. Peter Hessler is just an interesting dude. His life choices are very interesting. And I just enjoyed that. But as far as there's a lot going on in it, so it's hard to remember every aspect of it. But there is a lot about Egyptian history. I learned a lot about the Egyptian language, Egyptian Arabic specifically, and how different it is from other Arabic dialects, which I thought was fascinating. And also about the sort of group of Chinese immigrants that moved to Cairo to specifically sell lingerie. It was really fascinating. This book is really interesting, but it is kind of long, and it's not something that I picked up and was like, I can't put this down. I really had to segment it for myself. I don't know why. Probably because of the politic aspect of it. Sometimes politics are really fascinating for me. Sometimes they're really dry, and I just can't kind of connect with it. So maybe it was a little bit of that. All right. The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. I will be rereading this book this year. I fucking love this book. I love Dracula, the story anyway. And this is This is the story of Dracula told in the United States in the wake of Salem's Lot. So let's unpack that for a second. Dracula itself, to me, is a book about xenophobia. It's a book about queerness, because I do believe that Bram Stoker was gay. There's theories out there about it, and I choose to believe them. And I love Dracula. I love the epistolary aspect of it. And then Salem's Lot kind of takes that anxiety of the outsider and uses it to poison a small town in Maine. Like, that is what Salem's Lot is about. And then Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires takes that anxiety, right, and applies that to a small southern town in South Carolina, but also through the anxiety of motherhood, of wifehood, of being a woman that is not listened to, of misogyny, of being marginalized for and shoved into a hole of what femininity, what the role of a woman is, and fascinating, and through this lens of like the book club. So you have, what's great about Grady Hendrix is he does not write one female character. He writes multiple. They are all in their own way brave, but at the same time make terrible, ignorant mistakes. And also what I loved about this is he does not shy away from the racial dynamic and disparity within this. So like there is a character in here who's Black, who works for the main character, and the main character has a very particular view of their relationship that is not reciprocated by her once housemaid. And this takes place during the 90s. And she is, the main character is a stay-at-home mother who is constantly worrying about juggling everything that it takes to do that, constantly told that like it shouldn't be that hard, right? And told essentially to feel grateful and happy that she has everything that she has, which she does have more than many, right? And that's talked about as well. But then somebody moves in that is clearly a danger to the community, and nobody wants to listen to her. And it is so good. It is a slow burn, but Dracula's a slow burn. So Salem's Lot. So if you like Salem's Lot, you'll like that. I think I would suggest this to people that like Stephen King's Salem's Lot. The end is so dark. It was interesting. I got into this debate about the feminism in this book, and people were just like, I don't like her. I don't like the decisions that she makes. I don't like that she cows to her husband. And I was like, just because you are marginalized by your husband and treated poorly does not make you a bad feminist. Like this idea that feminism means that we, kick down the door and are super strong. No, like, being a feminist means that you want to have choice, and you don't always have it, right? And you want to fight for that, and you're trying to do that in any way, shape, or form that you can with the cards that you're dealt, but it doesn't work out. It doesn't look the same way for everybody. And for this main character, I would not call her the classic strong badass woman, but she does badass things, and I think that that's really important, right? And she's also not perfect either. She's not really the best mom. She's not really the best wife, but also her husband's kind of a dick, so that's fine by me. And she struggles to connect with women in her community, and does and then doesn't, and it's very complex, and I love that complexity. To me, that's what a good strong female character should be, right? So yeah, this idea, I think sometimes, especially with the media that we consume, we really want to live vicariously through characters, and I don't. I want to understand a character's point of view and understand the choices that they make based on the situation that they're put in, because that way I have more empathy for other people, right? And I'm not saying that I agree. Again, I don't agree with. I think that this woman is a little naive, and I think that she, unfortunately gets pushed to an incredible limit that I don't know what I would do in that situation. And that's the thing. I think it's just really easy to judge a character because they're not real. And it's easy to judge a character and say, well, you didn't do enough, or you weren't whatever enough. And it's like, you don't know. You don't know what you would do in that situation. You don't know unless you were in that situation, right? In that time, because this takes place in the mid-90s. This is the spiritual successor to My Best Friend's Exorcism, which might as well just plop up here right now. My Best Friend's Exorcism takes place in the 1980s and is told from a teenager's perspective. And Grady Hendrix talked about wanting to write from the parents' perspective in Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. Man, I cannot wait to reread this book. I fell deeply in love with Hendrix's writing by reading this one. I just love it. He is very weird, and I think that is good. My Best Friend's Exorcism is about female relationships. Again, it's about female friendship. Literally the entire lifespan of a female friendship, and what happens when one of the characters is possessed. This book is really about friendship, though, and how hard that is to be a woman. And again, these characters are very, they're from the 80s, so like they don't make the best choices. They say things that like today we look back and say like, no girl, we don't talk like that anymore. And he is able to kind of confront those things in a way that I think is really, it doesn't come off as like, I really hate it when specifically white authors do this thing where they're like, I'm going to put in this like perfect unicorn of a white person into the past. And they just know that racism is bad and they'll always speak up against it no matter what. And like, they'll just be a true shining warrior. Like, I think the only person that actually exists like that in real life is maybe Bernie Sanders. And I don't even know that for a fact, right? Like, so like, this idea of like the perfect, like looking at a situation and behaviors from our perspective now is easy. I think writing from the perspective of like of characters from that time period is hard, and I think that Grady Hendrix does a really, really good job of the good, the bad, and the ugly. I hope that makes sense. But yeah, I just think that it's like really silly, like when people are just like, oh yeah, like I think we did know that racism was bad, but I think that like people handled all those things extremely differently back then, and we aren't as outspoken about it, right? And that kind of leads me into the next one. We Are Not Like Them, which I did give 5 stars. I'm gonna give this as like a C tier though, and I have reasons for that. So this is one of those books that is very on the nose, but I also feel that we just do not live in a time of subtlety and kind of needs like there was a lot of stuff that was discussed in this that like, unfortunately, I think a lot of people still need to hear. It is written by 2 authors. One is Black, one is white. It is told from the perspective of 2 women. And again, female friendships. I'm all about it. I love it. I think it was Tina from Book Club, from Book Talk, etc., that said this, that she felt like, how would you not talk about these things, not talk about race in this relationship? I think that there are people that definitely do that, that think that they're really, really close and clearly aren't. And I think that that's what this book is really about, is about 2 people who grew up together, love each other, but never had serious conversations. And it's about those conversations. Now, that is in the wake of the white woman, and I can't remember the characters' names, and I'm really sorry, but we're going to go with it. The white lady, her husband is a cop, and he shoots an unarmed Black teenager who dies. And this all happens very, like, literally in the very beginning of the book. And the best friend, she is a reporter for the local news outlet, and she talks a lot about the racism in local television. The Black woman just struggled so much with perfection and let that get in the way of living her life and living her life authentically and not wanting to hurt other people around her. And I felt like some of the ignorant, dumb shit that the white lady said was like, I was like, yeah, I've heard that. Like, I that felt very real to me. Even someone who is as close to her friend as she says she is, like, it's clear that their relationship was strained by a lot of these things that they never really discussed. So I thought that that was kind of cool. And I just really wanted to know what happened in the end. I was like, I really want to see how this is resolved. And I really enjoyed how it was resolved. So yeah, I don't know. I like this book a lot. I think it's really important now. I think that there's still so many communities that just don't get into it. And I thought that, so Sarah from Sarah's Bookshelves Live, you can tell what podcast I listen to because I keep referencing them. She interviewed the authors for this, and I loved that interview so much. I really, really did. I thought it was really insightful, and I don't know, I just really appreciated it. So yeah, let's see. Let's bang through a few of these. Okay, High House. This is B tier for me. This book I think is coming out. I think it just came out, or it's about to just come out. Oh, sorry. It was an arc that I read in 2021. This is Cli-Fi. This kind of goes with Bewilderment, if you're into, it's that vibe. It also, if you like the book Severance, which was written in 2018, that it's kind of similar vibes to that. It's essentially about climate change and the catastrophe that is climate change and how it affects 4 characters living in a remote English kind of estate, and sort of how they survive. It's dark, and it's bleak, and I loved it, and I put it at B tier. There's not going to be like a best book. Okay. I don't know if I said that at the beginning, but I can't, like, it's just S tier. Like, everything in the S tier is great. Like, those are all my favorite. Like, to say that like Braiding Sweetgrass is better than Southern Book Club is just like lies, just lies. Okay, I'm going to bang through a couple more. Half Sick of Shadows, definitely C tier, only because it was too long, and but overall really cool. But the timey-wimey stuff is a little confusing. So Lady Shalott is like able to see the future through dreams, and so there's like this dreamlike kind of quality to it that is kind of confusing. So if you listen to this on audio, it might be a little weird. It might be better to read in print, and I think it is a little too long, but it kind of reminds me of Merlin in the sense that it's like the adolescent King Arthur vibes and like their wild adventures. And it's just a cool fantasy. I did enjoy this book a lot. When the Stars Go Dark is A tier for me. This is just like quintessential me. It takes place in the late 90s. It's about a woman who is a detective, who's really good at finding, or whose job it is to find missing people, but she's really going through it psychologically. I love that. If you have like a woman that's going through some dark shit, and struggling with that, like, I am here for that. Whether it's the loss of a loved one, or especially, well, that sounds weird to say, especially a child, but like, it's heart-wrenching, right? I love a book about a professional lady. I like a book about a lady who makes weird choices, kind of ones that aren't great for her health, obsessed with her job. Like, I'm into all that. So that book was so good. I hope that there's more from Paula McLean specifically about that character. I really loved her. Incognito is the next one. That's going to be an A tier. It's not an S tier because, and this is so messed up of me, but it's true, I have a really hard time with graphic novels. I love to read, and with the pictures can be kind of like distracting for me, so I don't read a lot of them, and it actually is slower for me. I don't know. It's harder to absorb the narrative. That's what it is. It's harder to absorb the narrative. But this is kind of different. This is written by an author who created a character who I think is actually based on a real person. I feel reasonably confident about that. So, okay, this is what I'll say about this, because I just did a quick look and I can't find out whether or not this exact character is based on a real person, but this narrative is based in truth. It is about light-skinned African-American people, mostly men, who covered lynching in the South that was still happening. And this in particular takes place in the 50s. This is a dark book. It is a noir, really. And I think that that's probably what makes it really successful for me, is that it took this noir structure and applied it to this very real historical fiction tale in a way that I thought was very brilliantly executed. So Matt Johnson is the writer, and then it was illustrated by Warren Pleece. And it's not for the faint of heart. It is not for, it is not a light graphic novel read. It's more within the kind of fun home like area of dark graphic novels, but also I think just really important and striking. Like, the illustrations are really, really striking. Yeah, I would recommend this one. Definitely an A tier for me, but I don't know. Yeah, it's just hard. I think graphic novels are just tough for me in general. And I hate to say it because, like, there's a lot of amazing stories that are told through graphic novels. It's kind of, I guess, this is what people feel like when they're talking about audiobooks. They're just like, I just can't do it. I think a good one to follow that up with is a totally different thing, which is Project Hail Mary. Definitely A tier. The orders of these is not. I'm just picking these all at random. Picking them entirely at random. So Andy Weir is a weirdo, and I love that about him. I read this one first. This is my first Andy Weir, and then I read all of his other ones after that, and I prefer this one the most. I loved Artemis, though, which I know is wild. Everybody's like, no, The Martian's the best one. And I'm like, I read The Martian second, and it's too similar to Project Hail Mary. It's not the same, but it's very similar. And I kind of liked Ryland Grace more than I liked Mark Watney, which I know is just a sin, but it's true. Sorry. I can't help it. I probably because we get more backstory on Ryland Grace. That's really, I think, why. I love me a good, deep character dive, and we got that with Project Hail Mary. So I'm not going to talk about the plot of this book because you have to just read this book. If you like space, if you like problem solving, if you don't mind math in a book, I don't think it's too much. I'm not like a math genius or wizard or anything. I loved it. I love watching a character solve problems. If you like character backstory, if you like adventure, that is what you will like about this book. Then The City We Became. This is definitely A tier. Ooh, look, A tier got all fat. That's so cool. I love it. Cute. Okay. So The City We Became is my first N.K. Jemisin book, actually. And it operates with the idea that each of the boroughs of New York City have this deity that walks among them, that is a living human being, but it contains kind of the essence of the city and specifically their borough inside of them. I really want my family that live in New York City to read this book and tell me what they think and get their impressions on the New York City-ness of it, because I just want to hear, like, my brother's girlfriend is like from Brooklyn. So I'm like, I really want to know what her vibe is on that. But yeah, I don't know. This book is just really well executed. I just think that N.K. Jemisin is a really fun author to read. And the worlds that she builds in this are fucking wild. And I love the plot line with Staten Island in particular. I love that they talk about how conservative Staten Island is. And so Staten Island's father is a really racist New York City police officer. And it goes, so if like depictions of like just really vile white dude, and there's some sexual assault in this too, bother you, like you might want to, you can skip through it pretty quickly, but if you just don't even go near it, then yeah. But I loved each of the different, like meeting each of the different characters, even Staten Island, because she's very complex. And there is sort of this larger overarching narrative of a bigger character kind of coming in and messing with the essence of the city and why that's happening. It's really cool. It's very sci-fi, and I loved it. I really, really loved it. Yeah, I don't know. I just, each of them meeting each other and learning about the different attributes. It was just, you know, I don't live in New York City, and I'm not really a huge fan of living in big cities in general. I'm kind of a smaller city vibe person, just me. But I really loved how this brought the city to life. And as somebody who visits the city pretty frequently to visit my family, I really connected with a lot of the imagery in this book. And yeah, it's weird though. And I will say that so I listened to this as well as read it at the same time. And this would be a great book to listen to because they do kind of interesting sound effects with some of the sci-fi stuff, and it was kind of fun. So, all right. Speaking of New York, Olga Dies Dreaming, S tier, baby, S tier. This is just like perfect character study. This is perfect. watching the evolution of someone who already is a really interesting and strong female character, and seeing the things that life throws at her and how she overcomes them, how her past affects that, her relationship with her mother, her relationship with her brother, all of that stuff. The first chapter is a great example of why I love this book. It starts off with her being this badass boss. She's organizing this wedding, and she's basically talking about how she's taking advantage of her clients in order to take those napkins. It's about napkins. Take these really fancy napkins, why they're important, and why she's making extra of them to then take to her cousin's wedding, and how it's going to be this flex at the wedding, and why she wants to flex on her cousin who she loves, but at the same time, like, is in this weird little rivalry with. And then she realizes that her staff member isn't there, gets on the phone, is screaming at somebody about, where is this guy? Yeah, I need, Jan, like, where's Jan? And it's just this woman on the other end of the phone crying hysterically saying, Jan's dead. And it's like, bang, end of the chapter, beginning of the next chapter, we're at Jan's funeral. And I was like, what is this? It's just so much happening all at once. There's a lot of dark stuff in here. Trigger warning for sexual assault. There's actually a few of these that I have content warnings that you should probably look up in Storygraph to do so, because it's a little bit more detailed about what those things are. Like a good example, Half Sick of Shadows has in the beginning has a trigger warning for suicide actually written into the book. So yeah. All right. I guess this is also considered a millennial novel, which I think makes sense. Yeah. All right, Luster, I'm actually going to put up right next to this. This is a controversial opinion. I loved Luster. It's dark. It's really dark and really twisted. Again, very complicated main character who I think is kind of unlikable, honestly. I think that she... because she is just the relationship that she is in, it's about her relationship with a married man. She moves in with him, and they have this slightly sadomasochistic relationship. I would say it's more emotionally abusive than anything else. I don't think this is a good example of sadomasochist S&M sort of relationships, or relationship with sort of set up boundaries, healthy boundaries. The man and his wife, they've adopted, they're white, and they've adopted a young black girl that they kind of hope that this main character is going to like connect with. And it's just this really fascinating character study. So like, if you go in knowing that, if you go in kind of knowing like this is just really about how these really damaged, complicated people are interacting with each other, then maybe you'll like it more. And I read this, and then I read The Other Black Girl, which are not the same book, but both take place in publishing. And I liked this one better than The Other Black Girl. And again, not because it's a better book. Like, I'm not trying to say like, it just, this one worked better for me than The Other Black Girl did. I found The Other Black Girl to be a little confusing at times with the plot. And the end, I was like, what? It's just a metaphor that didn't work for me. This was just biting. Like, this, the writing in this book, also another author, just, it's sharp like a fucking diamond. It just cuts right through you. And it makes me so uncomfortable. There were passages about this, like, that were so uncomfortable to me. And this character clearly is going through just not liking herself. And I think that there's very much a place for that narrative in, books in general. And we don't hear enough from it. And I just loved it. Also, I think kind of millennial. It talks about how ridiculous, the wage gap is, and how impossible it is to survive in the publishing world doing what, it was fascinating. I loved it. I really want to read whatever else this woman has to write. Let's plop Transcendent Kingdom in there. Very different book. Very, very different book. More about depression, but still a character study. A professional black woman dealing with, navigating the politics of her job. Although Lester wasn't, there was a lot of politicking with the job, but it was very different. Like, these are very different books. I kind of annoyed at myself that I put these two next to each other. I just grabbed it. But Transcendent Kingdom is just some of the most beautiful writing, I think. Like, that's actually what a lot of these have in common, is the writing itself is really, really, really beautiful. Probably the only standout in the S tier that I would say the writing is not as, like, gripping would probably be Red, White, and Royal Blue. That is the plottiest book I have on here. Maybe Dial A for Aunties too. Yeah, Dial A for Aunties is more plotty over writing style. All these other authors have a very particular writing style that I just really clicked into. And in many ways, it's not really what you're writing about, it's how you're writing about it. And that's what really did it for me in the S tier. Let's see. But yeah, Jesse, holy shit. Like, what a baller. Like, literally, like, what a heavyweight when it comes to putting together a sentence. Like, just the things that were painted inside of my head by Jesse about these quiet moments about depression and addiction and anxiety. It's about a woman who is a researcher working on mice, and it's very spiritual. She's also a Christian, and it's about her life growing up in Alabama and then getting into academia and her relationship with her mother. It's just so stellar. Oh my God. Like, just thinking about this book bowls me over. It'll just stick with me forever. Let's see. The Prophets I'm going to actually put down here in B tier, which sounds wild, but there's a reason for this. So this book is incredible, and it's incredibly well written. It is all, and it's written by someone who, he's a poet. He's a poet. However, sometimes I got a little lost in some of the visuals. Like, maybe it was because I was reading it too fast, but there are certain portraits in scenes that he paints in this that are stuck inside my head and literally chill me down to the bone. Like, I think of certain scenes in this book that make me deeply uncomfortable. And I think that's extremely successful. However, there were times when I found the writing to be a little challenging and just like above my ability to absorb. And so I think that other people should know that. Like, maybe it's just, I read a lot. I feel like I am pretty smart. I think I'm very average. I would call myself of a very average intelligence-ish, I think. And yeah, this guy's really smart. And there were times that I felt kind of dumb reading this book. I was like, whoa. That being said, interestingly enough, I would be curious to reread this and then reread The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois, because I think that book is more easily digested than The Prophets. The Prophets is beautiful. It's amazing. But at times I felt very dumb reading it. I was like, whoa, that's quite the sentence. And also, again, the way time works in that book. So let's see. Infinite Country, I am also going to put in B tier. For no other reason than, like, this is a totally solid, gorgeous book. It just didn't last as long for me as other things that I read. It's about a young woman who was born in the United States. Her mother and her siblings reside there. But she is visiting her father, who has been deported back to Colombia. And so it's a family drama. And I loved the scenes from the convent that she was in. I thought that was incredible. But this could have been longer. This is a really short book. I just think this could have been longer. What Comes After, I'm actually also going to plop down here. Oh no, look, I ran out of space. Okay, look. So What Comes After, beautiful, a little slow, but in a good way. And I can't wait to see what more this author has to write about it. I talked about this with the main book of the month pick. It's about a crime that takes place that you already know what has happened in the crime. One boy murders another, and it's told from the perspective of the victim's father, as well as a young woman who is pregnant who shows up at that man's door and is somehow involved with the crime, but it's not clear at first. And her relationship with the boys is kind of explored. Then the neighbor of this man is the mother of the perpetrator of the crime. So gorgeous, amazing. I actually love the Quaker bits from this book. I am somewhat familiar with the Quaker religion based on where I live, and I've attended some similar sort of services. So I loved that aspect of it. Like, I really, really enjoy that. I'm very kind of into the Quaker vibes. So specifically when they're talking a lot about waiting for the spirit to move you, like, and to speak, like, I love that, like, a lot, actually. That's sort of something, I guess, about me that you now know. So There you go. All right. Something Deeply Hidden. This is going to be also B tier. Yeah. We're going to put this in B tier for now. Actually, I'm going to put this in C tier and I'll tell you why. So here's the thing with this book. It's about quantum mechanics. It's nonfiction. And it's about explaining the theories around quantum mechanics, specifically the foundations of it. So again, I did not the most math that I have studied, I was in like the 11th grade. I was supposed to take like some kind of math class in college, but I was able to skate out of that through my gift of gab. So, and I haven't taken an advanced science course, but I love the way Sean Carroll talks about physics. I love thinking about the multi-world theory, and he goes into many worlds, and he talks about why it's such a controversial aspect of physics. And I had a great text conversation with a friend of mine who did study physics about this particular book, and actually my friend had worked with some of the theories that John Carroll had written about, and it was really fascinating. So there's not a lot to say about this other than if you like to read about science, I really enjoyed it. And I enjoy the way he kind of breaks stuff down. I will say it's not easy. Like there are definitely times when I was like, I'm just gonna let this wash over me because this is way too smart for me. All right, I'm gonna have to pull this down just a little bit because I don't have access to my stuff. Okay, pull it down and then I'll pull it back up. All right, People We Meet on Vacation, definitely C tier, because it's like a solid book and I liked it, but it's not like the best thing I've ever read in my life. I actually liked Beach Read more, but for what it is, like it does it very well. Like it's two friends who've known each other for a long time, and then they go on these vacations, and it's friends to lovers trope, and I just think Emily Henry's a good writer. So The Damage, definitely A tier for sure. I could not put this book down. Great legal drama, but also again it's about a man who is sexually assaulted, and so if hearing about depictions of sexual assault are going to bother you, then this one really goes into it, so it's going to really bug you. I would say it's not as bad as Girl with Dragon Tattoo, but maybe, I don't know, like depends on you. Now that I think about it, wow. I really just want to hear more from Caitlin Ware. She's also an attorney. Man, the end of that, I can't wait to reread that book, actually. Razorblade Tears is going to go in the B tier. Excellent palate cleanser, great action, a lot of heart, beautiful story about fatherhood, which, again, apparently I've read at least 3 books about fatherhood in 2021, which makes me happy. Actually, A Nearly Normal Family also has fatherhood elements in it, so we're going to say 4. Yeah, I don't know. I think the reason it's not an S or A tier is just because it is more focused on, like, it's kind of laid out for you. Like, there are complicated elements to this book, but it's not that complicated, and that's fine. It doesn't need to be. And it felt very cinematic to me, which in some ways is not always good, but in some ways is good. I don't know. Like, that's why it's B tier. It's just kind of there. All right. These Violent Delights is an A tier for me because it surprised the shit out of me. This is a YA fantasy that is a classic reinterpretation of Romeo and Juliet, but it's like badass. So, and there's kind of a Buffy sci-fi element to it as well, which I should say Buffy the fantasy element. I'm reading the sequel right now, and like Chloe Gong is a really, really good writer, and I kind of think the only reason we call these YA is because of the age of the characters, which I think is kind of silly. Like, it feels not YA to me at all. It has really incredible sentences in the I'm just rereading, or excuse me, I am reading Our Violent Ends right now, so I'm speaking about that book, but it's the same thing because it's a duology. Man, she can turn a sentence, like, and just make something really beautiful. But yeah, I don't know why these are considered YA, other than the age characters of the main characters. And from what I've heard, they're not the most popular YA, so whatever. I don't know why, but All right, Plague Year is definitely a B tier. This is about COVID, so if you don't want to read a COVID book, this is literally all this is about. Although I think it's just really great science reporting in this. There's also politics. It's basically about how the United States handled COVID in the first year of COVID. I cried during reading this book. I didn't think I was ready to read this book, but it was picked for a lecture series that I am a subscriber to, and because I'm a big dork, and I really, really, really appreciated the way that Lawrence Wright talked about the development of the vaccine and went into just kind of the history of how we got to here, and specifically around vaccine development, like how it wasn't just like born out of nothing, and it goes into the personal lives of a lot of the people working to end this crisis. And so if you're like, oh, I just don't want to read about bummery stuff, there's bummery stuff in this for sure, that might be too raw for right now, but I found a lot of hope in this book. Especially there's one particular person that's talked about in this book that worked in the Trump White House from day one to day end, and that was fascinating. Like, that character was really fascinating. It turns out his wife was a Democrat, that he personally had met Trump before he was appointed to his position and didn't like him, but felt that he had, I don't remember the guy's name and I feel bad saying that, but I think it's like Matt something. He specifically had a military record and a lot of knowledge about East Asian politics, and had spent a lot of time in China specifically. And so he really felt strongly about trying to help where he could, but also realized that considering the nature of that administration, there was only so much that he was going to be able to do. And so his perspective was really, really interesting. So yeah, I think Lawrence Wright's a really great writer. I actually picked up a few more of his books because I was like, you seem like you pick interesting. He also has a book about satanic panic, which I'm super fascinated by. So yeah, really, really fascinating. It is sad, but it's also so interesting. Yeah, man. I think I should bump this up to A tier. Sorry. I listened to this from the library because I was like, and I gave myself permission to not finish it. I was like, if this is too much, I'm out. I couldn't put it down and bought a signed copy. So there you go. Okay, we only have 4 more. Heart Principle, definitely. I'm going to put this in C tier. No, B tier. I think the way that this author handles a neurodivergent character is different every time she does, which I think is fascinating and cool. And I also think that this book was more about her and her evolution than it was necessarily about the romance. And I think that worked really well for this book. And I think it's the best of the 3, or, well, I shouldn't say that. I haven't read Bride Test. But I definitely preferred this over Kiss Quotient. Kiss Quotient was great, but Heart Principle was outstanding and really shows off how excellent of a writer Helen Huang actually is. So kudos to you. Malibu Rising, C tier, excellent palate cleanser, not the best Taylor Jenkins Reid book I've ever read, but I really enjoyed it. I love the historical fiction of the 1980s, and it kind of goes back further a little bit too. I love the way it ties into her, like, Evelyn Hugo averse that she is starting to build. I think that's rad and weird, because Daisy Jones was a part of that too. I don't know. I think that what didn't work for me overall for this book is that I read a lot of other really good stuff this year, and this just wasn't at the top of the heap. It's as simple as that, really. Magic Lessons is definitely B tier for me, which this is the best of, no, that's not true. This is the second best, I think, of the Practical Magic series. I am very controversial. I think Practical Magic is the best because of what it is, and I think it could have stood alone as its own separate book. I think if you're going to read these, note a few things. You don't need to read them in order. It doesn't matter. Like, it really doesn't matter. Like, I cannot stress how much it doesn't matter. I think the most recent one that she did is probably the only one you want to read last, because it kind of references everything else. But otherwise, I think you can read them in any order and you'll enjoy them. There's timeline issues within Rules of Magic, which is why it's not on this list. I was like, what? Why did you do that? Yeah, there's some timeline issues that Alice Hoffman did not go back and fix. I did not read Practical Magic in 2021, which is why it's not here. Otherwise, it would be. Magic Lessons. Okay, I need to back up. What is Practical Magic? So outside of it being a movie that a lot of people liked, the book to me is very lit ficky. It's very modern fairy tale. Again, if you're not crazy about books that are about magic or fantasy in general, but you like character studies, Practical Magic is perfect for you. If you're looking for a real fantasy book that gets into a whole lore and whatever, do not read Practical Magic. You're going to hate it. Practical Magic is like 4 really long chapters that are character studies about women that use magic, try to run away from it, try to run away from who they are, but can't, and what happens when real life catches up to them and they have to rely on this magic to kind of get through it, and to be stronger together. Magic Lessons kind of goes back to the initial curse that is kind of gets them in this predicament, and again is just about a woman and her life and her navigating a really difficult world. It starts in like this, I think it's 1600s. Yeah, and she is... Maria is, it talks about her, where her magic comes from, and fills in a lot of stuff that you then find out more about in Practical Magic. The reason I don't think you need to read these in order is because it's clear to me that Practical Magic was supposed to be a standalone. And she's only written these past 3 books, like within the past 4 or 5 years. So like Practical Magic really does kind of exist as its own thing. And then these other ones kind of fill in aspects that are kind of dropped in Practical Magic. So yeah, I personally loved the writing style of Alice Hoffman, which is why I keep going back to her books. It's really not the plot that I'm as interested in. It's how she weaves these beautiful, lush, gorgeous stories. Her writing is very dreamy, and it just it paints these glowy kind of images inside of my head that I just really, really enjoy. But yeah, and then the most recent one that just came out, I didn't think it was very necessary. I feel bad saying that, but it's called The Book of Magic, and I was like, this is fine. Like you could just read this one, Rules of Magic and Practical Magic, and live your life, or just this one in Practical Magic and live your life. Although Rules of Magic is really good, but again, timeline issues. Anyway, finally, this is a main book of the month pick. I'm gonna put this in A tier, Lincoln Highway. Yeah, I know that people don't all care for this book. I mean, that's like all books, right? But for me, I was really surprised by this book. I thought that it was going to be one thing. It turned out to be another. And just the sheer achievement of Amortals to tackle so many different characters across a really awkward timeline and geography was fascinating to read. I can't wait to read another Amortals. I've read all of his books at this point, and I really disliked Rules of Civility. I loved Gentleman of Moscow, and I really loved this one. I just think it's going to be kind of amazing from here on out. I just think he's found his footing as far as pace, as far as narrative, as far as character development. There's just some really heartbreaking moments in this, and I think I also just really enjoy this era. This is post World War II, when it was possible for children to just run around and do things, and it wasn't like a good idea, but it was possible, and yeah, I don't know, it's really kind of fascinating. So yeah, these are all of the books ranked. I know that people said they're like, oh, I want to know what your favorite book was of 2021. I can't pick that. Like, I can't, sorry, this is like jumping around. Yeah, I cannot pick a favorite book. I can't. It's not possible for me. Everything that's in S tier, though, are books, honestly, S and A tier, are books that I still think about. They're books that S tier in particular, I think I own every single one of these. The only one I don't own yet is Transcendent Kingdom. Of all of these, I'm in the S tier. Every other one of these I own, if not one, then multiple copies of. I'm totally, guilty of that. And Yeah, I mean, I would like theoretically recommend them to anybody, theoretically. So, but this has gone on for long enough. I don't intend these to be this long, but here we are. Let me know what you think of these books, if you like them, if you don't, but just be nice. Don't be a jerk about it. Like, we're not here to be jerks. I think it's great that you like what you like, and I'm going to like what I like. Otherwise, I will see you in the next one. And I just appreciate you being here. Bye.